Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. May Allah bestow upon all of you His protection, His mercy, and many of His blessings. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, seeking assistance and blessings by every name of Allah, the possessor of limitless mercy, the bestower of mercy. We are resuming our lessons this afternoon in our reading and discussion of the book Sifatu Salatin Nabiyyi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam min at-takbiri ila at-taslimi ka'annaka taraha, along with its English translation entitled The Prophet's Prayer sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, described from the beginning to the end as though you see it. In our previous lessons, we had been reading through statements of the four prominent leading scholars of Islam who have fiqh madhabs that are widely recognized and followed and studied. And we had been reading in our most recent lesson the statements from Al-Imam Al-Shafi'i. In particular, the statements of these Imams, Al-Imam Al-Shafi'i and the others, that have to do with following the ahadith that are authentic, making that what a person follows, even if the statement of a scholar goes against the hadith. What you follow is the hadith, and you leave the statement of the scholar alone so long as the hadith is authentic. And we have seen from the statements that we read before that all of the Imams were essentially united in holding this position, telling those who study their statements and who follow, or yeah, I guess we can say who study the madhabs attributed to those scholars, that anytime a person finds a hadith that's authentic, that is what the person is supposed to make their madhab. That's what they're supposed to take as the path that they follow. And they should set the statement of the Imam himself aside in the event that it contradicts a hadith that is authentic. So we have been reading the statements of Al-Imam Shafi'i in this regard, or at least the ones that are presented in the book. And we had reached the fourth of those statements. That's where we resume from today with Allah's assistance. Statement number 4 says, إذا صح الحديث فهو مذهبي. إذا صح الحديث فهو مذهبي. And in the corresponding English translation, it said, when a hadith is found to be sahih, then that is my madhab. When a hadith is found to be sahih, then that is my madhab. In the footnote here, with the references and comments regarding this remark from Ash-Shafi'i, may Allah have mercy upon him and may Allah have mercy upon all of our scholars. The footnote says, النووي في المصدر السابق والشعراني في المجلد الأول في الصفحة 5 في الصفحة 57 وعزاه للحاكم والبيهقي والفلاني في الصفحة 700. The references given here say that it was cited by An-Nawawi in Al-Majmu'. It was also cited by Ash-Sha'rani, giving its sources as Hakim and Bayhaqi, and it was also cited by Al-Fulani on that page that was mentioned. وقال الشعراني قال ابن حزم أي صح عنده أو عند غيره من الأئمة. Ash-Sha'rani said that Ibn Hazm had said this meaning that it is found to be sahih by him or by any other imam. Ibn Hazm here is commenting that this statement of Ash-Shafi'i, in which he said, إذا صح الحديث فهو مذهبي, when a hadith is found to be sahih, then that is my madhab. What the comment here is saying is that a Shafi'i means by this statement whether it is found to be sahih by himself or by any other imam. When it's found to be sahih, when it's found to be authentic, that is the madhab he follows, whether he himself found it to be sahih or any other imam. قلت, this here is Shaykh al-Albani commenting, وقوله الآتي عقب هذا صريح في هذا المعنى. I, meaning the author, Shaykh al-Albani, would like to point out that his saying presented next confirms this understanding. قال النووي رحمه الله ما مختصره. An-Nawawi, may Allah have mercy upon him, made some remarks that can be summarized as follows. وقد عمل بهذا أصحابنا في مسألة التثويب واشتراط التحلل من الإحرام بعذر المرض وغيرهما مما هو معروف في كتب المذهب. Our fellow specialists in the Shafi'i madhab, this is the way that we chose to modify this translation here. Our fellow specialists in the Shafi'i madhab acted according to this, meaning that you would follow the hadith that is authentic and you make that what you act based on. Our fellow specialists in the Shafi'i madhab acted according to this concerning tathweeb, meaning saying as-salatu khayrun min an-nawmi in the adhan for the Fajr prayer. Stipulating the condition, that's one issue. They also acted according to this concerning the issue of stipulating the condition that if illness prevents one from proceeding with the rites of Hajj or Umrah, then the person will exit the state of Ihram without any penalty. That's another issue that they followed the authentic hadith regarding, and other issues that are well known in the books of the madhab. وممن حكي عنه أنه أفتى بالحديث من أصحابنا أبو يعقوب البويطي وأبو القاسم الداركي. Among those of our fellow specialists in the Shafi'i madhab who are reported to have passed judgment on the basis of the hadith rather than the saying of a Shafi'i are Abu Ya'qub al-Buwaiti and Abu al-Qasim al-Daraki. وممن استعمله من أصحابنا المحدثين الإمام أبو بكر البيهقي وآخرون. And among the scholars of hadith who are also our fellow specialists in the Shafi'i madhab, Imam Abu Bakr al-Bayhaqi and others employed this approach. وكان جماعة من متقدمي أصحابنا إذا رأوا مسألة فيها حديث ومذهب الشافعي خلافه عملوا بالحديث وأفتوا به قائلين مذهب الشافعي ما وافق الحديث. When many of our earlier fellow specialists were faced with an issue for which there was a hadith and the madhab of ash-Shafi'i was contrary to it, they would act according to the hadith and give verdicts based on it, saying the madhab of ash-Shafi'i is whatever agrees with the hadith. قال الشيخ أبو عمرو فمن وجد من الشافعية حديثا يخالف مذهبه نظر إن كملت آلات الاجتهاد فيه مطلقا أو في ذلك الباب أو المسألة كان له الاستقلال بالعمل به. Sheikh Abu Amr ibn as-Salah said, when any specialists in the Shafi'i madhab find a hadith contradicting his madhab, they should examine that hadith. If they fulfill the conditions of ijtihad regarding all topics in general or regarding just the topic of that hadith in particular, it would be acceptable for them to act in compliance with that hadith if found to be authentic. This is the key idea here. It would be acceptable for them to act in compliance with that hadith if found to be authentic. He continues, وَإِن لَمْ تَكْمُلْ وَشَقَّ عَلَيْهِ مُخَالَفَةُ الْحَدِيثِ بعد أن بحث فلم يجد لمخالفه عنه جوابا شافيا فله العمل به إن كان عمل به إمام مستقل غير الشافعي ويكون هذا عذرا له في ترك مذهب إمامه هنا. Furthermore, even if they, the people that were being referred to earlier, even if they do not fulfill those conditions, the conditions of being qualified to do what is called ijtihad, even if they do not fulfill those conditions, but they realize after further analysis that it would be difficult to find any convincing justification for doing something other than what the hadith says, it is acceptable for them to act in compliance with the hadith if an independent imam other than a Shafi'i had acted in compliance with it. And regarding that particular issue, this would be justification for them to not act in accordance with the view about it that was held by the imam in whose madhab they specialize. النووي continues here and says, وَهَذَا الَّذِي قَالَهُ حَسَنٌ مُتَعَيِّنٌ وَاللَّهُ أَعْلَمُ. النووي commented, this approach that he, meaning Abu Amr ibn Salah, this approach that he mentioned is good and it is necessary to follow it, and Allah knows best. Shaykh al-Albani here now said, قلت وهناك صورة أخرى لم يتعرض لذكرها ابن الصلاح وهي فيما إذا لم يجد من عمل بالحديث فماذا يصنع? There is another possibility which Ibn as-Salah forgot to mention. What would one do if he did not find anyone else who acted in compliance with the hadith? أجاب عن هذا تقي الدين السبكي في رسالة معنى قول الشافعي إذا صح الحديث إلى آخره. This has been answered by Taqi ad-Din as-Subki in his article, The Meaning of Shafi'i's saying, when a hadith is found to be sahih, then that is my madhab. فقال والأولى عندي اتباع الحديث وليفرض الإنسان نفسه بين يدي النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم وقد سمع ذلك منه أيسعه التأخر عن العمل به؟ لا والله وكل واحد مكلف بحسب فهمه. He said, for me, the best thing is to follow the hadith. A person should imagine himself in front of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam, just having heard it from him. Would there be leeway for him to delay complying with it? I swear by Allah that there would not be. And everyone is accountable before Allah according to their understanding. That's the end of the quote from As-Subki. And Shaykh al-Albani continues by saying, وتمام هذا البحث وتحقيقه تجده في إعلام الموقعين في المجلد الثاني في الصفحة 32 و370. The rest of this discussion is given and analyzed in إعلام الموقعين. That's a book by Ibn al-Qayyim, إعلام الموقعين. He continues as well, giving other sources. وكتاب الفلاني المسمى إيقاظ همم أولي الأبصار للاقتداء بسيد المهاجرين والأنصار وتحذيرهم عن الابتداع الشائع في القرى والأمصار من تقليد المذاهب مع الحمية والعصبية بين فقهاء الأعصار. All of that is the title of this book. In the English, they had written, and in the book, in addition to إعلام الموقعين, and in the book of Al-Fulani, whose full title is what we just read, and they wrote in the English here, Awakening the Minds. This is how they chose to express the meaning of that title into English. Awakening the minds of those who have perception towards following the leader of the immigrants and helpers, and warning them against the innovation widespread among contemporary jurists in the towns and cities of following madhabs with bias and bigotry. We made some minor modifications here to the translation. And the Shaykh continued by saying, وَهُوَ كِتَابٌ فَذٌّ فِي بَابِهِ يجب على كل محب للحق أن يدرسه دراسة تفهم وتدبر. The latter is a unique book in its field, which every desirer of truth should study with understanding and reflection. These comments that we just read were related to the fourth statement from Imam al-Shafi'i, may Allah have mercy upon him. Now we move on to the fifth statement that was presented. أنتم أعلم بالحديث والرجال مني، فإذا كان الحديث صحيح فأعلموني به أي شيء يكون، كوفيا أو بصريا أو شاميا، حتى أذهب إليه إذا كان صحيحا. I will read that in portions. أنتم أعلم بالحديث والرجال مني. You are more knowledgeable about hadith than I. You are more knowledgeable about hadith than I. There's a footnote here. And the Shaykh commented and said, الخطاب للإمام أحمد بن حنبل رحمه الله. Shaykh al-Albani is commenting, saying that Al-Imam al-Shafi'i, he made this statement when he said that you are more knowledgeable about hadith than I. He was saying this addressing Al-Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal. Shafi'i is senior to Al-Imam Ahmad. Shafi'i is senior to Al-Imam Ahmad. So this is what he said to him. You are more knowledgeable about hadith than I. فإذا كان الحديث الصحيح فأعلموني به. So when a hadith is sahih, inform me of it. أي شيء يكون كوفيا أو بصريا أو شاميا. Inform me of it whether it is from Al-Kufa, Al-Basra, or Ash-Sham. Or in the translation they wrote, whether it is from Kufa, Basra, or Syria. حتى أذهب إليه إذا كان صحيحا. So that I may take the view of the hadith as long as it is sahih. So that I may take the view of the hadith, meaning the view that's presented in the hadith, so long as it is sahih. I may take that view, meaning make it the view that I hold and that I would propagate and teach as well. This was statement number 5. This footnote contains mainly references. We can read through it, inshallah. It began by saying that Al-Khitabu lil-Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal rahimahullah. This was said addressing Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal rahimahullah. رواه ابن أبي حاتم في آداب الشافعي في الصفحة 94 إلى صفحة 95. وأبو نعيم في الحلية في المجلد التاسع في الصفحة 600. والخطيب في الاحتجاج بالشافعي في الجزء 8 في الصفحة الأولى. وعنه ابن عساكر at the reference given وابن عبد البر في الانتقاء وابن الجوزي في مناقب الإمام أحمد والهروي من 3 طرق عن عبد الله بن أحمد بن حنبل عن أبيه أن الشافعي قال له فهو صحيح عنه ولذلك جزم بنسبته إليه ابن القيم في الإعلام والفلاني في الإيقاظ. In the English, they said that this was related by Ibn Abi Hatim in Adab al-Shafi'i, also related by Abu Nu'aym in Hilyat al-Awliya, by Al-Khatib in the book Al-Ihtijaj bil-Shafi'i, and from him Ibn Asakir, also collected by or related by Ibn Abd al-Barr in the book Al-Intiqa, by Ibn al-Jawzi and Manaqib al-Imam Ahmad, and by Al-Harawi, as the references mentioned. They have this narration collected via 3 routes from Abdullah ibn Ahmad ibn Hanbal, Imam Ahmad's son, from his father, and Imam Ahmad himself, that Ash-Shafi'i said to him this statement that we read just now, that you are more knowledgeable about hadith than I, so when a hadith is sahih, inform me of it, whether it's from Kufa, Basra, or Syria, so that I may take the view of the hadith so long as it is sahih. These routes, or this narration, was collected through 3 routes that were cited here. From Abdullah, from his father, and Imam Ahmad al-Shafi'i said that to him. Thus, it is authentically narrated from al-Shafi'i. This is why Ibn al-Qayyim definitively attributed it to him in I'lam al-Muwaqqi'in, as did al-Fulani in Iqaz al-Himam. And al-Fulani then added, ثم قال البيهقي ولهذا كثر أخذه يعني الشافعية بالحديث وهو أنه جمع علم الحجاز والشام واليمن والعراق وأخذ بجميع ما صح عنده من غير محاباة منه ولا ميل إلى ما استحلاه من مذهب أهل بلده مهما بان له الحق في غيره. وفي من كان قبله من اقتصر على ما عهده من مذهب أهل بلده ولم يجتهد في معرفة صحة ما خالفه والله يغفر لنا ولهم. Bayhaqi said, this is why he, meaning Ash-Shafi'i, used hadith so much, because he gathered knowledge from the people of Hijaz, Syria, Yemen, and Iraq, and so accepted all that he found to be authentic, without any bias and without leaning towards what was preferred according to the madhab of the people of his own land, when the truth was clear to him elsewhere. Some of those before him would limit themselves to what they found in the madhab of the people of their own land, without attempting to ascertain the authenticity of what opposed it. May Allah forgive all of us. This is the statement that was cited from Imam al-Bayhaqi. May Allah have mercy upon him. May Allah have mercy upon all of the scholars of Islam. Continuing back up now to statement number 6. كل مسألة صح فيها الخبر عن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم عند أهل النقل بخلاف ما قلت فأنا راجع عنها في حياتي وبعد موتي. For every issue about which there is a report from the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wasallam that is considered authentic by the scholars of hadith, and it says something contrary to anything that I have said, then I take my saying back, whether during my life or after my death. We'll repeat that. For every issue about which there is a report from the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wasallam that is considered authentic by the scholars of hadith, and it says something contrary to anything that I have said, then I take my saying back, whether during my life or after my death. The reference or the footnote accompanying this narration says, Abu Nu'aym fil Hilyati wal Harawi wa Ibn al-Qayyim fi I'lam al-Muwaqqi'in wal Fulani. They had written Abu Nu'aym, Harawi, Ibn al-Qayyim in I'lam al-Muwaqqi'in, and Fulani. That was statement number 6. Proceeding onwards, we have now statement number 7. إذا رأيتموني أقول قولا وقد صح عن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم خلافه فاعلموا أن عقلي قد ذهب. In this statement, Ash-Shafi'i had said, if you see me saying something and contrary to it is authentically reported from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, then know that my intelligence has departed. We reiterate, if you see me saying something, Ash-Shafi'i is saying, if you see me saying something and contrary to it is authentically reported from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, then know that my intelligence has departed. The footnote accompanying this narration said, رواه ابن أبي حاتم في آداب الشافعي وأبو القاسم السمرقندي في الأمالي كما في المنتقى منها لأبي حفص المؤدب وأبو نعيم في الحلية وابن عساكر بسند صحيح. In the translation they had written, Ibn Abi Hatim in Al-Adab, Abu Qasim al-Samarqandi in Al-Amali, as in the selection from it by Abu Hafs al-Mu'addib, Abu Nu'aym, and Ibn Asakir, with a sahih sanad. In other words, a chain of narration that is authentic. So again, we see that this is something attributed to Imam Shafi'i by way of a chain of transmission. This is something being reiterated here. And we saw this previously as well, showing the care that the scholars have given to preserve even the statements of scholars by way of their chains of transmission, so that we can be assured that these things were statements that they did actually make. That was statement number 7. Statement number 7. We move on to statement number 8 among the statements that were presented from Imam al-Shafi'i, may Allah have mercy upon him. كل ما قلت فكان عن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم خلاف قولي مما يصح فحديث النبي أولى فلا تقلدوني. For everything I say, if there is something authentic from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam contrary to my saying, then the hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam comes first. So do not follow my opinion when it does not have a valid basis or does not conform with the Quran and authentic Sunnah. We reiterate again. For everything I say, this is Imam Shafi'i speaking, if there is something authentic from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam contrary to my saying, then the hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam comes first. So do not follow my opinion when it does not have a valid basis or does not conform with the Quran and authentic Sunnah. The footnote accompanying this remark says, Ibn Abi Hatim wa Abu Nu'aym wa Ibn Asakira bi sanadin sahihin. Again, this is something that was narrated from Imam al-Shafi'i with a chain of transmission. And it is something that is authentically attributed to him and something that can be traced back to him that he actually said, not merely a remark that someone made up and wrote down and started to spread about him. The ninth and final remark presented from Imam al-Shafi'i says, كل حديث عن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم فهو قولي وإن لم تسمعوه مني. Every statement narrated from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is also my view, even if you do not hear it from me. Every statement narrated from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is also my view, even if you do not hear it from me. This is the final statement from the Imam al-Shafi'i that was presented in this section. The accompanying footnote for this quote said Ibn Abi Hatim, and at the reference given. These statements that we have read from the Imam al-Shafi'i, we have probably paused today's lessons here, as the next section will begin with statements from Imam Ahmad, and then some further discussion will take place after that. And these statements are all clear, inshallah. They can be understood. They're very simple and straightforward, showing that the idea that we have seen so far from Imam Abu Hanifa, from Imam Malik, from Imam Shafi'i is that they are scholars who have a very prominent rank among the scholars of Islam, and they have fiqh madhabs that have spread far and wide and that are very intricately and precisely arranged and documented and studied. The statements of these scholars have been preserved regarding many issues among the various rulings of Islam pertaining to all sorts of topics. However, all of them say that when there's an authentic hadith, that is what they hold as their view. And as the last statement we just read here, as this last statement said, even if you do not hear it from me, this is an idea as well to keep in mind. saying to those who come later on that even if you don't hear a hadith, an authentic hadith from that scholar himself, and he didn't say it and he didn't write it down, and you don't have it being attributed to him saying that that was his view, he's saying here, don't worry about that. I'm telling you that the default is so long as you come across an authentic hadith, that is what I'm telling you to adhere to and to follow. If you don't find anything from me about the topic, do what the hadith says. If you do find something from me about the topic and it's not what the hadith says, do what the hadith says. If you find something from me about the topic and it's the same as what the hadith says, good. I agreed with the sunnah and I agreed with what the hadith said, and my statement is in conformity with it. Otherwise, you go back to what the hadith says so long as it is authentic. This is what we make our madhab in Islam, because this is what all the scholars made their madhab in Islam. The imams of these madhabs and all the scholars in general. So this is a theme that is very clear from all of these statements. It may be a bit repetitive, but the point of repeating the statements is to show how many of them there are, the fact that they can be traced back to these scholars, the fact that even the books that specialize in these madhabs cite these very same statements from these scholars. And all of this serves to show us what the perspective we should have is when we come to studying fiqh, and the approach we should take to fiqh madhabs and learning. We accept what the scholars say, we can study details, but our point of reference is always the Quran and the authentic Sunnah. Anytime we find a statement of a scholar that does not conform with those sources, we go with the sources and we leave other statements to the side, and that does not detract from the scholars. But as was said before, the perspective we should have is it's very possible that certain things might not have reached them. No scholar among them ever said that they know every single hadith. This is a topic that we touched on before. So they are, out of their humility and out of being honest, they made these statements to convey to us the idea that no single one of them had all the knowledge of all the hadith there are. So if we come across something and we find it's authentic, this is what we hold on to. Inshallah, this idea is clear, and we'll pause today's lesson here in our reading from Sifatu Salat Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And with Allah's assistance, we hope that in our next session, we will cover the statements of Imam Ahmad, may Allah have mercy upon him, and perhaps a little bit of the discussion that may come after that, if Allah makes that possible for us. Wallahu a'lamu, and Allah knows best. Wa sallallahu wa sallama wa baraka ala nabiyyina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man tabi'ahum bi ihsanin. And may Allah grant commendation, protection, and blessings to his messenger, as well as to the messenger's family, the messenger's followers, the messenger's family, the messenger's companions, and all continue following their path until the day of recompense. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdika. Oh Allah, you are perfect in every way, and we praise you. Nashhadu an la ilaha illa anta. We testify that none has the right to be worshipped except you. Nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayka. We seek your forgiveness and we repent to you. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. And may Allah bestow upon all of you His protection, His mercy, and many of His blessings.